Hello everybody, thank you for joining us for today's video. Today's video is going to be the first part in a series we're going to do, maybe not all in a row, but over time, of how do you even become a therapist and what is being a therapist like. So we're going to start right at the beginning. So to become a therapist, like what kind of schooling do you need? Do you need schooling? What degree could you get? Is there more than one?
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Good questions. I actually always laugh because Josh and I have this similarity that both of us were pretty much like waist deep in our program before we realized, we're maybe going to become therapists. What is this?
That's true. Yeah.
Which I don't know is necessarily the way everyone wants to do it, right?
Sure.
Maybe if you have thoughts about wanting to be a therapist, it would be a good idea to know where to start and what that even looks like. So before you can get into any kind of a program to become a therapist, you already have to have a bachelor's degree. It doesn't necessarily have to be in social work or psychology, but you have to have a bachelor's degree.
And I would say there are benefits to your bachelor's degree depending on which route you want to go, for sure, for your master's program. Specific example I'm thinking of is like if you do a bachelor's in social work, you can get your master's quite a bit faster in social work.
Or some of us can't, but that's okay.
But psychology and social work, even at a master's level, are not the only degrees you can get to become a therapist.
Right. Well, and I think it's helpful for people to know too, because a lot of people get into a bachelor's degree in psychology thinking that's going to help them become a therapist. But actually, a bachelor's degree in psychology does not mean that then you can get a master's degree and become a therapist. That's not actually how that works, which is kind of weird if you think about it. The three programs that I'm thinking of off the top of my head are social work, right? So you can get a master's degree in social work. You can get a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, or you can get a master's degree in mental health counseling. Those are the three routes that I can think of. Did I miss any?
Those are the ones I know of.
Well, the only other one would be psychology, but you have to have a PhD. Well, you can do some school counseling with a master's degree from my understanding, but you have to have the PhD, not the master's, and that would round out the fourth.
Right. Well, and I guess that would be good for us to clarify too. We're not talking about how to become a psychologist. We're talking about how to become a therapist, right?
Yeah.
And those are not the same thing. Psychologists can do more diagnosing. School takes longer. And master's level therapists are probably the majority of therapists that you kind of see, especially in this area, right?
And it's not psychiatry, which is a medical degree, and those people can prescribe medication, right? Master's level therapists are not prescribing medication.
No. So if you're hoping to go to a master's level therapist and get medication, they're going to have to send you somewhere else because we don't prescribe medication.
Yeah. So
and we shouldn't.
Sometimes I'm glad I don't have to. No, I'm glad I don't have to. I think the psychology one is important to point out. I think I've talked quite a few people in my life out of doing psychology degrees and into doing social work. Not because I have something against psychology degrees, but a lot of people who do go into psychology really want to be a social worker. They just make the assumption that you get a psychology degree to do that, and that's not the case.
Right, it's not the case.
Right, Shara?
Right. Okay, so first you get a bachelor's degree, and then you have to get accepted into a master's program for one of these specific ways towards licensure, right? So I don't know, would you say anything about what does that master's degree look like? What kind of classes are you going to have to take?
Gosh, I don't know. That's a great question. I think one of the things I would normally say is that the routes are a little bit different, but I don't know if I'm speaking accurately to this. So if this sounds off base, by all means, correct me. The way I tell people is that I imagine that the clinical mental health counseling route is very heavily focused on individual therapy and counseling, right? So the techniques are going to be individual based, one-on-one, how do we do this, how do we do that? Whereas something like marriage and family therapy will probably be a little bit heavier focused on a dynamic, right? Looking at a systems approach and two different personalities. And then what I tell people about social work is that almost ends up being like a macro level thing, which for those that don't have a therapy background, it would be looking at things like community organization or
social problems,
social large scale stuff.
And so a lot of the social work route, I think, actually gets more away from the clinical stuff and more into the self-advocacy and helping the community and that kind of thing. But I don't know if I'm explaining that right at all.
No, I think that's accurate, and because of that, I think it's also important to consider if you're looking at going in this field. Inherent in what you just described, social work has a lot more options of what you could do with your degree. There are social workers in a million different jobs, it seems, doing a million different things. Whereas maybe if you're a marriage and family therapist, I think I know what you're doing with that degree.
Yeah,
Right, there's not as many options, that's for sure. I think it's really interesting too, though, that in all of these programs, you are going to have there are specific courses that have to be involved for you to be able to become any kind of a therapist. And those are going to be things about, like, you're going to have to take courses on things like addictions and things like mental health diagnosing and psychopharmacology, right? Prescribing medication, even though you're not actually going to be doing that, you need to know some about that. Mm-hmm. So there are courses like this that you are going to be required to take, no matter which program.
So, I think universally for all three of these things, this is true. Like, your journey to becoming a fully licensed therapist does not end with graduating school. So what comes next after you finish school?
Well, and I would say even before you graduate, you have to start working at some kind of an internship or practicum, right? So where you're actually starting to practice some of the things that you're learning, but under supervision of some sort. And so that's going to be happening before you finish graduation. But then graduation comes, right? And after graduation, they keep changing this, but there's a licensing exam you have to take. Some people have taken it right as they've graduated, and some people have had to wait for the next 2 years before they can take it. Well, it used to be 2 years. Now it's like 3,000 hours.
Whenever you're watching this video, it'll be different. So I won't say what the requirements are, but there is some level of, like, you have to take an exam given by the licensing, DOPL is what it's called here, but the licensing division of whatever state you're in.
This is where they really decide if you could be a therapist or not. Hopefully you didn't take out a whole bunch of student loans because
and then fail your test.
Actual test.
Yeah, just fail the test. Did you guys think the test was scary?
Oh, unbelievably. I worry about
I haven't taken it because when I graduated, the rules were different.
Oh, that's right.
So I still have yet to take it.
So you'll see.
I actually
they gave me a bonus test in between, so.
I forgot you had to do an extra one. That's terrible.
Oh,
I actually thought it was really scary taking the test. And I don't think they give you a score. They just give you like a pass or fail, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't even know how well I did on it. But I remember being super intimidated because you walk into a testing center and like basically have to prove like there's nothing on your person.
Scan your palm to get in.
Right. Yeah. Like all of these crazy security things to make sure you don't cheat. And it's a pretty lengthy test. Yeah. That's for sure.
Oh, and some of them are test questions, so they don't count, but you don't ever know which ones those are, and it's all multiple choice. Who's ever been good at multiple choice? Crap.
Right. So there is a test at some point, whether that's right after graduation or when you're done with your hours or both.
Yeah.
Or both in Jaden's case.
Yeah. But you mentioned hours, right? And I think that's an important part of the whenever you graduate, whatever rules they had, there are hours involved. And so you graduate, you take your test, or maybe you don't take a test, but you have to work these hours, and these are like your supervision hours. So for that time, you're working under somebody else's license, and it's your supervisor, and you have to work so many hours under a license. And I don't know if the rules are different for social workers versus marriage and family versus clinical mental health. I have no idea. But there are a certain amount of hours you work and before you can become fully licensed. And it's not a little amount.
No, it's quite significant. It used to be that you couldn't get them before 2 years, right? Even if you worked full time, you had to take 2 years to get those hours. And during that time, you can practice therapy, but you're practicing it under supervision. So that means that you have somebody who has to meet with you regularly, probably weekly, and go over your caseload with you, and they go over your documentation.
Right, they sign all of your notes.
Right. Sign all of your notes, walk you through some of the interventions that you're doing with people, help you assess for safety risks and that sort of thing. So it's not just that you graduate school and then you're set free. You have 2 more years of time that you're under supervision. Well, something around 2 years, right?
Yeah. Let's put an asterisk on all these things. All these are subject to change at any moment. So,
right.
I don't know. Anything else? I mean, I know we want to talk about more of this stuff, but anything else you'd include with going to school, getting your hours, getting your license?
I would just say the only other thing we were talking about a minute ago is even then you're not done, because you have to keep getting something that are called continuing education credits, which means that every 2 years to keep your license, you have to do a certain amount of hours of learning and growing as a therapist. And some of those hours are based in things like ethics. You have to take ethics courses and suicide prevention and intervention courses. And those are required every time that you relicense. You have to prove that you have done so many continuing education credits. So this is not a field to get into if you don't like to learn, because you're learning all the way through your master's degree and all the way through your supervision hours, and it's not done there, right?
And then you'll be having to go to trainings for the rest of your career if you want to keep your license. So
yes.
Which I think is helpful.
I think it's important for the field that people stay training.
Yeah, I think so too. And so, if you're somebody who is a lifelong learner, then maybe this is a good field for you. But if that's not something that you're looking forward to, I would steer clear, because you're going to need to learn a lot and continue learning a lot to be in a field like this.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you have any questions about becoming a therapist or what it's like to be a therapist, we'll be talking about some more of this in the future. So leave it in the comments and we will get to them eventually.
Thanks.
Bye.